This conference will now be recorded.
Alright, let's begin from accounts payable, business process requirements. Assuming that you are working in any project for implementation or rollout, you have to configure the accounts payable module. If you want to configure accounts payable module, how you are going to get the business requirement is what let's try to understand. First point before we start about accounts payable business process or accounts payable requirement, first we need to understand what is accounts payable all about. What we are going to do in the accounts payable. In your accounts payable, you are going to deal with vendors. In accounts payable, we are going to deal with vendors. Now this vendor is called as different alternative names in the real environment. Some call it as vendor, some also call it as supplier. This supplier is also called as creditor, and this creditor is also called as seller. Any other names we get for vendor? Assuming these are the names that we are normally calling a particular vendor in the business process. So you may call it as vendor, supplier, creditor, seller. All these are the same names. Wherever you get any transaction related to vendor, this is straight away related to your accounts payable, because vendor is a subledger account for your accounts payable. Now let's write accounts payable is a subledger accounting. Accounts payable is a subledger accounting. Subledger is connected to main ledger using reconciliation account. Subledger is connected to main ledger using reconciliation account. Next point, we have two types of vendor transactions in business. We have two types of vendor transactions in business. So one is finance vendor transactions. Second one is PO vendor transactions. One is finance vendor transactions. Second one is PO vendor transaction. Now your finance vendor transactions is pure accounting entries. So FI module only. These are pure accounting entries, FI module only. Next one, on the PO vendor transactions, these are logistics related entries, module integrated to FI module. Okay, logistics related entries are module integrated to FI module transactions. Now, when you are initially configuring accounts payable, you are going to keep the first point in our mind. Now, here we are configuring and testing FI module accounts payable. Initially, we will be configuring and testing FI module accounts payable, which is this pure finance entries. This one, PO vendor related transactions, we will be doing as part of our FIMM integration scenario. Okay. Now in accounts payable, we will be classifying vendors into different categories. In accounts payable, we will be classifying vendors into different categories. Now, what kind of a categories we will be classifying in your vendor? So, this classification is done to make sure we report our payables properly in the balance sheet. You are going to classify your vendors into different categories to make sure you report your payables properly in the balance sheet. Now, accounts payable is a current liability. It is represented on liability side of the balance sheet. Okay, this is represented on the liability side of the balance sheet. Next point. Any transaction posted to vendor account is captured in the subledger account and is transferred to main ledger using reconciliation account on real time. When you're talking about real time, we are talking about immediately the data is getting transferred into your FI module or into the GL account. Okay. Now let's write vendor categories. What are the vendor categories that we normally have? Let us try to list out. Let's say I'll write. Now this vendor categories is something that you are going to get or that you are going to receive from your client. According to their existing business process, they are going to share what kind of a vendor categories classifications they currently have and how they want to have this vendor categories or classification on SAP. Either they might use the same classification in SAP or they might add further classifications in SAP. But this information is what you are going to receive from your client. Let's say we are going to have local vendors. Point number one, you have local vendors. Point number two, you have foreign vendors. Point number three, you can have third party vendors. You can have one time vendors. Next, you can have intercompany vendors. You can also have intra-company vendors. You can have employee vendors. These are some of the examples. You may have additional vendor account groups also, depending on the business process, depending on the business requirement. But whatever the categorization, whatever the grouping that they have for the vendor, your client is going to share with us, and you need to understand, okay, how many vendor account groups are there. Accordingly, we need to start our configuration. Even if you see, your first configuration in your account payable begins from the vendor account group. So this is very important for us to understand what are the vendor account groups that we have. Now here you have around 7 vendor account groups. Why are we creating 7 vendor account groups? Even though for us everything is a vendor, why we are segregating vendor account groups? This segregation of your vendor account groups is to make sure you are able to prepare proper reporting for your financials. Tomorrow, everything is a liability to you, everything is a payable to you. But if I want to know how much I need to pay to my local vendors, if I want to know how much I need to pay to my local vendors, I will be able to easily find out by verifying the account balance in local vendor GL account. Similarly, if I want to know how much I need to pay to my employees, I'll be opening this employee vendor GL account to see what is the outstanding balance. Point number one is to have the proper representation in your balance sheet. If you look at your balance sheet, in balance sheet you are going to have liabilities, you are going to have assets. Now inside the liabilities, earlier when we were studying, we used to write something called sundry creditors, correct? When we studied, we have written sundry creditors or accounts payable on the liabilities side. When you are writing sundry creditors, you are representing all the creditors. So that is why you are writing sundry creditors, which represents all your vendors, all your payables. But when you are actually preparing a financial statement or a balance sheet in any organization, you need to ensure that the clear information is represented here. So here you are going to put, let's say, accounts payable as a heading. Inside the accounts payable, you are going to write all these things. Under accounts payable, you are going to represent all these things in your balance sheet, which means each and every category of vendor liability is clearly represented in your balance sheet. To ensure this kind of a proper reporting is enabled, you must segregate your vendors according to nature of their business process or nature of the transactions you are going to perform. Okay, so once this is done, next thing is to proceed further on how we are going to initiating the baseline configuration for your accounts payable. Point number one, you are going to receive different classification or categorization for vendors. This vendor classification or categorization we are treating as account group for vendor. Okay, within the vendor you are going to classify different account groups based on the business requirement, based on the reporting requirement. Now this accounting group is also used for representing your nature of vendor by looking at the master record. When we say this, let's say tomorrow you want to know how many foreign vendors you have with you. Tomorrow if I want to know how many foreign vendors we have currently, it is not possible for us unless you have a dedicated classification or grouping for foreign vendors. If you are creating everybody as a vendor commonly, if you want to identify foreign vendors, you have to do a manual rework. You need to take out all the vendor account masters. From there you need to filter vendor country as other than India or other than your local country. Now these kind of things are not enabled if you are using vendor account groups in a proper way. Even if you want to pull out the vendor masters, it is easy for you to pull the vendor masters based on the vendor account group. When you are generating the vendor reports, if you pass this foreign vendor account group, system is going to display only the vendors who are created as foreign vendors. Similarly, employee vendor or any other category of a vendor. Point number one is to create proper representation in your balance sheet. Point number two, to pull out the vendor master records according to the business requirement. Right? Now, next one, once you have the vendor categories with you, you need to decide on vendor number ranges. Once you have the vendor account group, next thing is to identify the vendor number ranges. Now, according to us, everybody is a vendor. It is we who classified our vendor into 7 categories or several categories. When you categorize a vendor into several categories, on what basis are you going to identify that this is a local vendor, foreign vendor, or third party, or any other category of vendor? There must be some unique categorization, unique logic to identify by looking at the vendor number. In order to do that, you are going to follow the same approach that we have used for GL account group number ranges. For GL account group number ranges, what we have decided, you have decided one series is for asset, two series is for liability, three for income, four for expenses. Similarly, the way you are able to identify by looking at the account number, the nature of account, on the same basis, on the same logic, by looking at the vendor number, one must be able to identify what is the nature of this vendor. Whether this is a local vendor account, foreign vendor account, third party vendor account, one-time vendor account, and so on. Right? For this to happen, you need to have dedicated vendor account group. For each vendor account group, you are going to maintain a number range. And when you are maintaining the number range for each vendor account, this thing is what you are going to discuss with your client. You are going to check with your client how you are going to identify local vendor, foreign vendor. Currently, in their existing system, we will check with them if they have any logic. Let's say in their existing system, they are identifying all the local vendors with one series. This is 2 series, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's say this is what is the current logic that they are using in their existing business process. When they get into SAP, they want to have the same logic because all their business users, everybody is aware of the same logic. Any vendor number which is beginning or which is starting from one series, they understand it's a local supplier or local vendor. Similarly, if a vendor account is starting from two series, they know it's a foreign vendor. Like this, there is a logic which is already existing in the current business process, and if possible, if the same logic can be incorporated or enabled in SAP, we are going to use the same logic. Right? So wherever possible, you need to ensure you are going to simplify the things in your SAP system, not complicating. Let's say this is the logic that you are going to decide to create the vendor number ranges. Assuming your client is okay with this approach, now once you freeze the starting digit for your vendor, next thing is to identify what is the length that you are going to use for your vendor account. Maximum 10-digit length is what we can use for a vendor account, but are we sure that we are going to use 10 digits for a vendor account, or we are fine with 4-digit vendor number, 5-digit, 6-digit, up to 10 digits? Normally you can create 5-digit vendor number or 6-digit vendor number. Right? If you create a 10-digit vendor number, it is very difficult to remember the vendor code because you are going to have so many vendor masters. You are going to have huge number of vendor masters. If you are creating big length of number, let's say 8-digit vendor code, 9-digit, 10-digit, very difficult for anybody to remember the vendor number. So we will normally try to create 5-digit vendor code or 6-digit vendor code. In most of the scenarios, we will be either proceeding with 5-digit code or 6-digit code for vendor number. Now here, when you are creating vendor number, you need to ensure for these, you are going to freeze the number range like this. Let's say this is your number range: 1 series, 2 series, 3 series, and 7 series. Next one, once you create vendor category, once you create vendor number range, next thing is to identify how you are going to create your reconciliation accounts. Now you have clearly understood what is your vendor grouping, what is your vendor number range. Now next point, when it comes to integration with your sub ledger and main ledger, this vendor account is posted as a sub ledger in SAP. When we talk about vendor account is posted as a sub ledger, when you're initiating any transaction, you're not going to use accounts payable GL account, you are going to use respective vendor account. When you are using vendor account, your vendor account is not a GL account. Vendor account is your sub ledger account. If you look at the account types here, you have GL accounts, you have vendor accounts, you have customer accounts, you have asset accounts. Normally these are the four type of accounts that we will be using. All your GL accounts are represented by S. All your vendor accounts are represented by K. All your customer accounts are represented by D, and all your asset accounts are represented by A. This is how you are going to represent your account types. So when you are posting any transaction in your accounts payable, all your account payable transactions are related to this vendor accounts. Okay, so this is called as your accounts payable. Let's say AP. This is your AR. This is your asset accounting. This is your GL module. Now your financial statements. Financial statements are prepared from GL module. Okay. When we talk about financial statements, we are talking about trial balance, P&L, and then balance sheet. This trial balance, P&L, balance sheet is a must reporting requirement for every organization at the end of every month. If you want to prepare a trial balance, P&L, balance sheet, you are not going to consider vendor account in the trial balance. You are not going to consider vendor account in P&L. You are not going to consider vendor account in balance sheet. Then how these things are represented in your balance sheet if you are not writing vendor account? You are not going to write vendor account because this is a sub ledger account. Okay, this is your sub ledger. These three are sub ledgers, and this is your main ledger. Here GL module or from main ledger. Okay, you are going to prepare TB P&L balance sheet from GL module or from the main ledger. This main ledger is not going to include vendor customer asset. If you are not including vendor customer asset, how our financial statements are going to be correct? Now your financial statements are going to be correct because this vendor customer asset, these three subledgers are always connected to main ledger using reconciliation GL account in SAP. Any entry that you are posting to the vendor account is automatically posted or reflected in the respective GL account because every vendor master, every customer master, every asset master, in short, all your subledger master records will have a connection with main ledger GL account. Whenever you are creating a vendor master, you have to ensure each vendor account is properly aligned or each vendor account is clearly assigned to a respective accounts payable reconciliation GL account, so that any transaction that you post will be posted in two ledgers. One is your sub ledger, the other one is main ledger. Your vendor account is always coming along with the respective GL account which is mapped in the master record. So whenever you are passing any transaction in the sub ledger account, this is automatically on the spot represented on the GL also. There is no need that you will move the balances from subledger to main ledger because this is real-time integrated via reconciliation GL account in the master record. Now, when we know that in your balance sheet, you have to represent like this. Now, you need to keep this point in your mind, how your payables are reported or represented in your balance sheet. If they say, this is how we are representing our payables in the balance sheet, these are nothing but your reconciliation GL accounts. Whatever you are representing in your balance sheet under accounts payable, these are called as reconciliation GL account. You need to verify whether you are going to have separate reconciliation account for each account group that you are creating, or there are any account groups which are commonly using same reconciliation account. Both are possible, right? Let's say here I have GL1, here I have GL number 2. Let's say here I have GL number 1, here I have GL number 3, GL number 4, GL number 4 here, GL number 5 here. This is also possible. Option number 1, you can use same reconciliation account for multiple account groups, Option number 2, you can use separate GL account for each account group, GL1, GL2. Okay, both are possible. We have to be very clear. How is your client requirement and how you are going to meet this business requirement? Majorly, we are going to use this approach. For every account group, there will be a dedicated reconciliation GL account. If you have 7 reconciliation GL accounts, which represents you have 7 account groups for vendors. Okay, according to this, you are going to decide what will be the number of account group, what will be the number of reconciliation GL account. Once you identify this, you have to understand their reporting requirement, which is nothing but on the balance sheet how they are representing their payable. On that basis, we are going to decide number of vendor categories is nothing but vendor account groups and vendor number ranges. Once you have this, we need to do the configuration. Once you have these two information, you need to do the configuration. When you do the configuration, when you do AP configuration, you are going to refer two documents. One is business blueprint or solution design document. Second point is your KDS document, correct? When you are performing accounts payable configuration, you are going to refer two documents. Document number 1 is your business blueprint or solution design document. Document number 2 is KDS. Business blueprint document is going to talk about how your account payable process works in your organization. And your KDS document is going to represent what account groups that you have, what number range that you are going to create. Let's say this is your KDS document. Okay, your KDS document is going to talk about vendor account group, and then number ranges. Vendor account group and then number ranges. Whatever the number range that you have agreed with your client, that number range is what you are going to represent in your KDS document. Let's say you are going to decide, or you have decided to go ahead with 6-digit number range for your vendors. Assuming for local vendors you are going to use 1 and 2. Okay, this is what you are going to create for your vendor number range. Similarly, 2 series, 3 series, 4 series, 5 series, 6 series, 7 series. Okay, like this you are going to decide, and then you are going to capture this information in the KDS document. Same thing here. This will be 2 series, this will be 3 series, this will be 4 series, this will be 5 series, this will be 6 series, this will be 7 series. Now if you look at this, this is something that we can directly write. Okay, if you see this, this is something that we can directly write when we are discussing with the client. But when you want to bring this information into SAP system, you need to identify this with some naming convention. There is something called naming convention. Naming convention is nothing but if you want to create this vendor account group in the system. So let me go to OBD2. OBD2. If I go to OBD3, OBD3 is where you are going to create vendor account groups. Here you are able to see vendor account group. Now whatever we have written in the KDS document is the vendor account group description, correct? This is the vendor account group description that we have written. But to configure this in SAP, you need a code, 4-digit account group code is what is required to create this vendor account group in SAP. Now, what will be this 4-digit account group which you are going to create? Who is going to tell which code you are going to create? If you are configuring, you have to configure this according to the client requirement. Now, this is your client requirement. These are the groups that they are currently using in their organization. And they have decided to go ahead with the same numbers or same grouping. How you are going to create these groupings in SAP? What naming convention are you going to use? Are you going to create V1, V2, V3, V4 or any other logic? Right? So this naming convention, what you are going to create for every setup or for every configuration that you are defining is represented in the KDS document. Your KDS document is going to talk about local vendors. What is the identification for local vendors? Let's say if you are creating Z001, you are going to create Z001, or you can create V001, vendor 1, V002, V003, V004, V005, V006, V007. Okay, otherwise you can create something like ZV01, ZV02, ZV03, ZV04, ZV05, ZV06, ZV07, something like this you are going to create. Z is something that you are going to add or to represent that these are the number ranges used for your client. Because even when you are in the real environment, when you go to this screen, SAP will contain or SAP will predefine certain vendor account groups in the system. SAP will have certain account groups in the system. When you're adding your own account groups, there may be a controversy, there may be the sequential mismatch, because system is going to show something like this 0102, but if your account groups are created with another naming convention which are not in the sequence, now when the user is trying to create the vendor master, they are going to get all these account groups which are not related to your organization also, because there are certain SAP standard account groups which we are not supposed to delete. So to ensure that user is able to identify the right account groups and the master data is created properly without any mistakes, we will be ensuring that the account groups that you are creating either start from Z series or any one series in a sequential order. Let's say we are proceeding with this. Let's say we will be proceeding with this. This is your group. Next one, once you freeze, this is the account group, and then you know the number range that is to be created. For these number ranges, you are going to create anything. Let's say I am going to use Z1, Z2, Z3, Z4, Z5, Z6, Z7. Something like this you are going to map in the SAP system. When you have this information, only then it is possible for you to define configuration in the system. If this information is not there, on what basis you are going to decide what will be the 4-digit account group? When you are practicing, whatever comes in your mind, whatever you feel is good, you are creating. But when you are working on a project, when you are defining these settings for a particular client, who is going to tell all this information? In your project, you will be only guided, you will be only instructed to perform or to configure accounts payable setup. Now for everything, you are not going to ask what is the naming convention I will use, which code I need to use, what is the number range I use. You have to understand all these things are already discussed with the client, already documented in a document called KDS, key data structures. You need to ask for KDS document. You need to ask for the KDS document. They will share the KDS document to you. If you look at the KDS document, that is going to have all this information. By looking at this information, when you log into SAP, if you come to account group screen, if you click on new entries, you know what account group to be created. You know the account group is already there on your Excel sheet. Just come here, Control C here, go to SAP, Control V here. Next one, this is the description, local vendors, Control C here, Control V here, whatever the description that is given. Just press enter, click on save, that's it. This is how you are going to define your baseline configuration for accounts payable. Do you need any specific special quality to do this, or if you know basic system operation, that is fine. If you know how to read the data in Excel sheet, how to copy, how to paste, anybody can create accounts payable configuration. But why these account groups are created, why they have decided to go ahead with this number range, why they decided with Z1, Z2 is what you have to understand. That is where you have to start thinking. If somebody is questioning you in your interview, or if you have to work, if you have to discuss with a client tomorrow on any project, all this information, all these points is what you have to speak out. Because we are not supposed to talk about configuration to your client. Very simple, you are not going to talk about configuration T codes to your client. Then you are supposed to talk with your client to do any requirement gathering to solve any problem. Now I need to talk to my client, but I should not talk about configuration. Then what am I going to talk? You are going to talk about business process with your client. Understand the business process. According to the business process, try to do the config. So configuration is clearly consultant specific, and you will be doing all alone. So nobody is going to sit along with you when you do the configuration. It is your individual personal activity to perform. Right? Once you find this account group description, let's say if this is all Dell, I am going to put DEGR at the beginning to ensure that these are all this one. But in the real environment, there may be the client or company name, group name to represent all these things. Dell Group one-time vendors, Dell Group intercompany vendors, Dell Group intra-company vendors, Dell Group employee vendors. Like this you are going to define. When you are defining this, there is one more thing. While creating the vendor master, you are going to talk about field status of the vendor master record. When you are creating a vendor master record, there are different fields. And when you are creating a vendor master, do you have any sensitive information which is mandatory for every vendor? Let's say you are talking about address. Address is mandatory for every vendor. So you are telling that no, there are certain vendors in which address is created incorrectly. Somebody did not mention postal code, somebody did not mention street address, somebody is not mentioning state or city. Now, if you have missing information, it will be difficult for you to track or for you to trace, approach, contact your vendor. Now, to avoid these kind of things, you may be ensuring that at the time of a vendor master creation itself, these fields are mandatory. Without full address, one cannot create the vendor. Likewise, any field if you want to show as mandatory, or if you do not want to see any particular field, you are going to have something related to field status while creating the vendor account group. Okay, so field status of your vendor master data is controlled at vendor account group at configuration level. If you double click on this, expand field status. Now for all the local vendors that you are going to create, let's click on field status. This is same like now when you click on this field status, this is giving us one information. What information it is giving? Position the cursor on the field status to be edited. Now if you look at the field status heading here, it has got three headings: general data, company code data, purchasing data. You have general data, company code data, purchasing data. These three data are called three segments of your vendor master. When you are creating any vendor master, you are going to have three segments in vendor master. One is general data segment, company code data segment, purchasing data segment. Your address is part of general data segment. Select this general data, click on field status. Now in this you have different subcategories within this. Let's say address. Let me double click on this address. If you double click on this address, there are different fields that are available here. Now on the top right hand side, if you see page 1 by 2, if you see this page 1 by 2, which means there are additional fields apart from this, and you will be able to see the additional fields by clicking on this icon, next page, or page down icon or page down button on your keyboard. Option number 2, do a right click, you will find next page here. Option number 2, click on next page by doing a right click, or click on this icon on the keyboard, or you can press page down on your keyboard. If you do it, now it is showing page 2 by 2. So when you are planning to make a change of any particular field, if you are not able to see that particular field, first thing that you have to look at is the page count. Is this a single page field list or there are multiple pages? If there are multiple pages, you need to switch to the different page. For example, if you see the field status, you have 4 options: suppress, required, optional, display. If you put anything as a suppress, the suppress field is not visible while creating the master record. When you are creating the vendor master record, suppress field is not visible. System will hide this suppress field. Next one, required field. Required field is mandatory to be given while creating the master data. Let's say if I put name 1 as required entry, without name I cannot create the master record. If I put optional entry means it is not mandatory. If applicable, you fill it up. If not, leave it. Whether you fill up that field or you leave that field, system is not going to consider. It will still accept the record. Display means the particular field is visible on the screen, but you cannot edit anything. Display means field is visible to the user, but user cannot write anything in that particular field, which means that field is visible in the grayed out mode. Those are your display mode. Come back. Now whenever you are configuring vendor accounts groups, make sure you are going to create vendor account group. At the same time, you are also changing the field status if required. Now what I am going to do, let me quickly create these account groups. I'll put Z001 DHER account groups. Okay, let me re-log in. OBD3 is the T code for vendors. Add a new entry, ZV01 local vendors. You can save directly or you can click on next entry, ZV02 DEGR foreign vendors. Click on next entry again, ZV03 third party vendor. Next entry, ZV04 one time vendors. Next entry, ZV05 intercompany vendors. Next one, ZV06 intra-company vendors. Next one, ZV07, employee vendor. Let's say you created all these things. Once you create all these things, if you click on save, it is going to save all the records. Okay, save this. And if you come back one level, you are able to see all these 7 account groups that you have created now. This is your first level of configuration when you are in any project. You are going to create vendor account groups like this. Just copy paste activity from your KDS document. You are not going to take the business requirement. You are not going to check with anybody. Straight away, you are going to refer the blueprint document, KDS document. From there, you are going to initiate your config. Right? Once the account groups are created, next one is to create number ranges. For number ranges, XKN1 is the T code. When you create XKN1, you will go to number range intervals. Currently, in this practice system, you are able to see so many number ranges which are already used. So many number ranges which are already used. But when you are in any real environment, when you are in any project, these kind of number ranges will not be there. This screen is completely blank. Okay, in any project, all the number ranges are completely blank, which means you are free to use any number that you want. Now, if you wanted to create the same number range, we may not be able to create the same number range in the system because of non-availability of the numbers. Because different users have practiced, different users have created number ranges in different way. Left and right, the people would have created, and whatever the number that you wanted may not be available for you to use. Okay, so at this point, you're not supposed to think too much because this is something that will happen only in the practice environment. So XKN1 only in the practice environment. To identify the availability of the number ranges, we are going to click on interval, click on free intervals. This free intervals is going to tell you the numbers that are currently available for usage. Okay, we wanted to go ahead with 6-digit number range. Let us verify where the 6-digit numbers are locked. 1, 2, 3. This is your 6-digit number range. And this is another 6-digit number range. So here what I am going to do, somebody has taken all zeros until this, but they will not be creating so many numbers. So what we will do, we will reduce the number count. We'll make this to 100, 100, and then I'll save it. Now from 100, 101 onwards, the number ranges will become available for us to use. Let's go to interval, click on free intervals. Now you are able to see from 100, 101 to 1 to all lines is available for usage. Same thing you are going to do when you are practicing. If your desired number range is not there, select any one number range. This is slow. Select any one number range, just edit the 2 number. Reduce the 2 number count so that from there onwards the number ranges will become available for you to use. But don't waste your time here, don't think too much, this is not required. Okay, let us create number ranges, but before you create number ranges, you need to ensure that the naming convention that you decided are available. We decided to go ahead with Z1, Z2, Z3 till Z7. But I see Z1 somebody has already created. If somebody has already created, it is not possible for us to use the same number. We need to change our logic to meet the requirement. Let me come down. If you see here, somebody has already used Z1, which means we cannot use Z1 now. So instead of Z1, let me try to create Y1. Okay, I'll replace Z with Y. I'm replacing Z with Y only for the testing purpose. Now what I am going to do, I am going to change number range also according to the availability of the number. Let me go to free intervals. 100, 101. From this number I need to use. Copy this. 100, 101 to, let's say 100, 199. Okay, here I am going to use 100, 201 to 100, 299. 100, 301 to 100, 399. 100, 401 to 100, 499. 100, 501 to 100, 599. And 100, 601 to 100, 699. 100, 701 to 100, 799. Something like this we have decided the number range. Here somewhere we are going to compromise to put 1 series, 2 series, 3 series, 4 series here. This is only because the number ranges are not available in this test server. But you are not going to do like this in any project. Whatever the number that you wanted to create, any number you can create, because the number range is completely blank in the real environment. Clear? So don't think too much here. If you are understanding, fine. If you are not understanding, whatever the number range is there, just to proceed with it. Don't think too much. Don't get unnecessary confusions at this stage. Now these are the number ranges that we want. Let's go to SAP. Now straight away let me click on add intervals. You need 7. Let me insert 7 rows. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What I'll do, same copy paste activity. Copy 7, paste 7, copy from numbers, next copy 2 numbers. This is how exactly you are going to do config when you are in any project. Save it. You're not going to think anything, you're not going to do anything innovatively. Simple copy paste activity is your config. Go back. Now account groups are created, number ranges are also created. Any doubt so far how we created account group number range? How you will receive the data, how you will do it? Clear? Okay. Next one, once you have vendors, once you have the number ranges, third one is to connect your vendor number ranges with your vendor account group. For that, you have another transaction code, OBAS. If you go to OBAS, this is the setting about your vendor account group with number range. We know the account group that we have created starting from ZV01. Go to position, put ZV01. Now here you don't have the number range. Now you know for all this, this is what the number range. Control C here, copy. Go to SAP, Control V, paste, enter, save. Your complete configuration is driven by your Excel sheet or your requirement document. You're not going to think anything when you're configuring the system, especially when you're in the project. You need to have all the information predefined, and according to predefined information, you are going to maintain config. So that is why whenever you are configuring, make sure you know what you are going to configure well in advance. It's not that on the system you are thinking what to do. Clear? This is your initial configuration. Once we have these 3 settings, we have another setting. If we go back to the config for vendor that we have done before, so vendor, these are the 3 things. Vendor account groups now we have created, number ranges we have created, number range assignment is created. Next one is to create accounts payable GL accounts. Next one is to create accounts payable GL accounts. Now these accounts payable GL accounts we need to ensure we have properly created. Go to FS00. Our company code is DEIN. Go to accounts payable. Here is your accounts payable. In this accounts payable, we need to have 7 groups. Here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you have local, you have import, but the naming convention that you have given is local, foreign. So you need to accordingly align the descriptions of the GL account. Local vendor is fine. Sorry. Let me go to change. Accounts payable, let me put local vendors. Second one, accounts payable. This is not import, we have given the description foreign. So I am going to put foreign vendors. Now all these descriptions will be given to you by your client. Now you have trade, but do we have trade? We don't have trade. Instead of trade, let's put this as third party. Accounts payable, third party vendors. Save it. Next one, employee vendors. Employee vendors. Save it. Next one, inter you have, but with inter you have created two. One is your intercompany, second one is your intra-company. Intercompany vendors. For next you have 5. This is your one-time vendors. You need one more account group, intra-company. Copy this 5 and then let's put this as 6. Create. This one we are going to create intra-company vendors. The server down. Let me relog in. I think that session may be idle, not respond. Okay, FS00 accounts payable. We want to create another accounts payable for intra-company vendors. Select this intercompany. Next number is your 6. I'll make this as intra. This will be intra-company vendors and save it. Now if you see this, you have got 7 GL accounts. You've got 7 GL accounts. From 241 all zeros until here. Let me show this here. Look at this here. You have this GL accounts on the left hand side, accounts payable, local, foreign and all. But on the right hand side, you have the account groups and then the description here. If you are looking at local vendor, you have created account group as ZV01, number range as 1. Number range as 1, your number range is representing as 1. Which means everywhere this is identical, logical that one series is used. Similarly, when you are creating a GL account also, we need to ensure for local vendors, you are going to create 241 all zeros 1. You are going to create 241 all zeros 1 to ensure that the GL number is aligned with this grouping, so that it's easy to remember even for your client, even for the users. Your account group is ZV02, straight away I'll know that, okay, foreign vendor is 2 series, ZV02 will be the account group, number range will start from 2 series, number range interval is Y2 or Z2, GL account will be 241 all zeros 2. Something like this, logically you have to think and then create, because this is the first time that you are creating. This is your initial implementation, first time you are creating. Make sure everything you create with certain logics. Not that just like that, whatever comes in your mind you are creating. Let us not do that, because this is not the way you are going to configure when you are in a project. Wherever you are able to create some logic, some discipline, you have to create that logic, you have to maintain the discipline, so that going forward, once the project is gone live, your users are going to follow the same discipline, same logic that is defined at the beginning of the project. Otherwise, users will left and right create. Later on, anybody who is replacing you in the project as a consultant, or anybody who is replacing the client as a user, it will be difficult for them to understand how system is set up, why they have set up all these things, how we need to understand what is the logic behind this. Now, as of now, I am going ahead with the same numbers, but remember, wherever possible, you are going to create things in a proper, in the disciplined manner. Because when you are working in any project, you are not going to configure things in bits and pieces. Before you start your configuration, you are going to have complete business blueprint with you. You are going to have complete KDS document with you. By looking at everything, you are going to decide what number ranges you are going to use, what naming conventions you are going to use, to ensure that logically everything is properly aligned and it is easy to understand, easy to remember. Clear? Now this is about your vendor or your accounts payable basic settings that we have discussed in the previous session. Now we know that every vendor is also treated as a business partner in SAP. In SAP, to create a vendor as a business partner, we must ensure the same number ranges are available in business partner. First, let us go to BP number ranges to check if these numbers are available or not. To check the business partner number range, we know that there is a T code called BUCF. Let's open BUCF now. BUCF. If I go to BUCF, if I go to change intervals, let me check the free intervals. Here we are not getting any 6 series numbering series. Here you don't have any 6 series numbering, but if you see where that 6 series is locked, you are able to see here. 66667 until this is 3 series they have used, but they have created only one number here. So what I will do, I'll try to change this to 7000. Save it. Let me check on free intervals now if we got that range available. Now if you see from 7001 till 6 digits, the number range have become active, correct? Now the number range has become active. Let's close this. Let me insert 6 number ranges. I'll add 6 here plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We need 7 and we have to create the same series y1 to y7. Paste here and from numbers next one 2 numbers, copy 2 number, enter. Let's save this. Okay, number ranges have been saved. Now did we maintain same number range for vendor and business partner, correct? y1, y2, y3, y4, y5, y7. Clear? Now one point that we need to understand, one number range will be internal, one number range will be external. Which one will be internal, which one will be external?
Business partner will be internal and vendors will be external.
Correct. BP will be internal, so we are not going to tick this external checkbox here. Next one for your vendor XKN1. Intervals. Let's go to Y series. All this Y series, we have to make sure that these are external. Is this correct? Your vendor number range must be external, your BP number range must be internal. Click on this. So this is working a little slower, server. Broken. We change the user. Is server slow for everyone or it may be due to my network connectivity issues? Connection reset by peer. Okay. Let me go to xkn1 intervals y1 to y7, save it. Now these are saved. Next one, let's go to business partner settings. Two more settings we have, then we'll close it. BP grouping and CVI setting. In this, go to cross application components. From this, SAP business partner, basic settings, number ranges and grouping. Number range we already did using BUCFT code. Next one is grouping. Before that, let's make sure Z series is available. Okay, this is available. Come here, put grouping Z1 to Z7. Same grouping we are going to put here. And short text, long text, let's put same thing. Number range Y1 to Y7. If you see, we are not doing anything on the SAP except copy paste activity, correct? Save it. Enter. Now this setting is also completed. Let's go back. Next one is your master data synchronization, customer vendor integration, which is nothing but CVI. In this, business partner settings, in this settings for vendor, because now we are working for accounts payable. Open this, assignment of vendor integration, assign keys. First one, number assignment, direction BP to vendor. Open this. New entries. Now same groups we have created here and there. So it will be ZV01 to ZV07, both for your BP and for your vendor. Enter. Next one, you want same number everywhere, tick this same number, proceed to save. Done. We are done with your initial configuration for accounts payable. Clear? We have not done anything additionally, we have not done anything new. Whatever we did for one vendor in ECC, one vendor in S4HANA, same settings we have done, but we have done for all the settings from the Excel sheet now. Understood, right? What we have done and what you need to do for your company code.
Yes, sir.
Right? Make sure in your company code you are going to create similarly 7 account groups. In the next class, which is your tomorrow morning session, we will try to understand how you are going to receive the different master data from your client. How you will receive the master data, how we are going to upload the masters, because initially you are going to have huge number of vendor accounts to be created. Who is going to create vendor master, how the vendor master will be created, we will try to understand in the next session. But make sure by tomorrow morning session you have this vendor account groups created in your company code. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. All right, then let me stop this recording.